The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the polished marble floor of the Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom. I adjusted my simple navy blazer, feeling distinctly out of place among the sea of designer suits and cocktail dresses. My wife had insisted I didn't need to wear anything fancy to her company's annual celebration, but now, standing in the opulent venue, I wondered if I should have ignored her advice. "You made it." Her face lit up as she spotted me near the entrance, her emerald dress catching the light as she hurried over. "I was worried you'd get stuck in traffic." I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Wouldn't miss it for the world. You've been talking about this night for weeks." She squeezed my hand, her excitement palpable. "The partners are announcing something big tonight. Everyone's been buzzing about it all week." She glanced around nervously. "Just stay close to me, okay? Some of the senior management can be a bit pretentious." I offered with a knowing grin. I was going to say traditional, but yes. She laughed, the sound cutting through my anxiety. "Come on, let me introduce you to some people." The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of handshakes and forced smiles. Most of her colleagues were pleasant enough, though I could sense the subtle assessments behind their polite greetings. My wife was one of the rising stars in the firm, a senior marketing director who doubled their client base in 18 months. I was proud of her, even if I didn't quite fit into her corporate world. "Ah, there's Mr. Whitmore," she whispered, her grip on my arm tightening slightly. "The VP of Operations. I should say hello." We approached a cluster of executives surrounding a tall man with silver-streaked hair and a practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. His custom-tailored suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and he wore it with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. "Sarah," he boomed, his voice carrying across the conversation. "There's our marketing maven. Come, join us." My wife stepped forward, and I followed, maintaining a respectful half-step behind. "Mr. Whitmore, thank you for organizing such a wonderful event. Only the best for our best people." His eyes finally landed on me, and I watched his expression shift subtly. "And who's this?" "This is my husband," she said, her voice steady and proud. I extended my hand. "Pleasure to meet you, sir." He looked at my hand for a fraction too long before accepting it with a limp shake. "Husband. I see." His gaze swept over my outfit with barely concealed disdain. "Sarah, I didn't realize you were bringing a guest. This is primarily a company function." "The invitation said +1, she replied, her smile tightening. "Yes, well, I suppose we should have been more specific about the dress code." Whitmore turned back to his colleagues, effectively dismissing us. As I was saying about the quarterly projections. Heat crept up my neck, but I kept my expression neutral. My wife's hand found mine, squeezing apologetically. We'd barely stepped away when Whitmore's voice carried over again. "Must be quite something, being married to success," he said to one of his companions, just loud enough for us to hear. "Some people are born to lead, others are born to support." I felt my wife stiffen beside me. "Ignore him," I murmured. "This is your night. Don't let him ruin it." "He's always like this," she whispered back, frustrated. "He treats anyone he considers beneath him like they're invisible. I'm sorry you have to." "Hey!" I turned to face her fully, blocking out the rest of the room. "I'm here for you, remember? Nothing else matters." She took a deep breath and nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "You're right. Let's get a drink and find my team. They're actually nice people." As we made our way toward the bar, I couldn't shake the feeling of Whitmore's eyes boring into my back. In my peripheral vision, I caught him leaning toward another executive, saying something that made them both glance in my direction and chuckle. I'd dealt with men like him before. Men who measured worth in dollar signs and job titles, who couldn't conceive of value existing outside their narrow definitions. But tonight wasn't about me or my bruised ego. Tonight was about supporting the woman I loved, even if her boss was making that considerably more difficult than it needed to be. The bar was a welcome respite, and I ordered a whiskey while my wife got her favorite Chardonnay. Her marketing team welcomed us warmly, and for a few minutes, I actually relaxed. They were younger, more genuine, and genuinely interested in conversation beyond corporate politics. "So what do you do?" asked one of her colleagues, a friendly woman named Jennifer. "I work in investment consulting," I replied, keeping it vague. It was technically true, though it barely scratched the surface. Mostly risk assessment and portfolio management. "Oh, that sounds interesting. Are you with one of the big firms downtown?" "I'm independent," I said. "Prefer the flexibility." My wife shot me a grateful look. She knew I hated discussing work at her events, partly because explaining what I actually did led to complicated conversations I preferred to avoid. We'd agreed years ago to keep our professional lives separate. Her success was entirely her own, built on talent and relentless work ethic, and I never wanted anyone to think otherwise. "Attention, everyone!" A voice boomed over the sound system. "Please make your way to your assigned tables. Dinner will be served shortly, followed by tonight's special announcements." We found our seats at a table near the back, appropriate for lower management and their guests, my wife explained with a rueful smile. As people settled in, I noticed Whitmore working the room like a politician, stopping at each table with practiced charm. His demeanor changed depending on the audience, warm with the partners, condescending with the junior staff. When he reached our table, his smile took on a sharp edge. "Everyone comfortable back here?" he asked, his tone suggesting we should be grateful for having seats at all. His eyes landed on me. "I hope you're enjoying the evening, mister?" "Just fine, thank you," I replied evenly, deliberately not offering my name. "Good, good." He leaned against an empty chair, addressing the table but clearly performing for a larger audience. "You know, we work hard to make these events special. Black tie affairs, though I suppose not everyone got that memo." Several people shifted uncomfortably. My wife's jaw tightened. "We wanted to create an atmosphere of elegance," Whitmore continued. "First impressions matter in our business. Appearances matter. It's about respect, for the company, for your colleagues, for the standards we uphold." He straightened his cufflinks. "Of course, not everyone can afford to maintain those standards, and that's understandable." "Mr. Whitmore," my wife began, her voice carrying a warning note. "Sarah, please, I'm not criticizing." His smile was poisonous. "I think it's admirable, actually. You've done so well for yourself, worked your way up from nothing, and now you can afford to support." He gestured vaguely in my direction. "Well, a comfortable lifestyle for everyone." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Around us, conversations had died. People were watching now, some with sympathy, others with the guilty fascination of witnessing a car crash. I took a slow sip of my whiskey, meeting Whitmore's gaze over the rim of my glass. "You know what I've always found interesting?" I said conversationally. "How some people confuse expensive clothing with actual value. Easy mistake to make." His eyes narrowed. "Excuse me." "Just an observation." I set down my glass carefully. In my line of work, I've learned that the people who spend the most time broadcasting their importance are usually overcompensating for something. The truly successful ones? They don't need to advertise. A flush crept up Whitmore's neck. "And what exactly is your line of work? Besides, presumably, spending your wife's income." "That's enough." My wife stood abruptly. "You're out of line." "Am I?" Whitmore spread his hands innocently. "I'm simply making conversation. Though I suppose I've touched a nerve. Tell me, does it bother you, having to explain your unusual situation? Successful woman, supportive husband staying in the background. Very modern." I remained seated, forcing my hands to stay relaxed on the table. Years of high-stakes negotiations had taught me that the person who loses their temper loses the battle. My wife's success is her own. I'm just lucky enough to be part of her life. How humble. Whitmore's voice dripped with sarcasm. The supportive spouse, content to ride coattails. I'm sure that takes a special kind of man. He paused. Or perhaps just one without many other options. That's it. My wife grabbed her clutch. We're leaving. I stood, placing a gentle hand on her arm. It's okay. No, it's not. She whirled on Whitmore. You have no right to speak to him that way. You don't know anything about him. I know enough. Whitmore crossed his arms. I know what I see. And what I see is someone who doesn't belong here, at an event for professionals who've earned their place. The room had gone completely silent now. Even the waiters had frozen in place. I looked at Whitmore, really looked at him, seeing past the expensive suit and cultivated superiority to the insecurity beneath. Men like him built their entire identity on hierarchy, on keeping others beneath them. The thought of someone existing outside his understanding of the social order genuinely threatened him. You're right, I said quietly. I don't belong here. My wife turned to me, hurt flashing across her face. Not because of what you think, I continued, holding Whitmore's gaze. But because I prefer spending my time with people who measure worth by character rather than quarterly earnings. No offense to present company. None taken, Jennifer muttered from her seat. Whitmore's face had gone red. If you're quite finished. Actually, I interrupted, my voice calm but carrying across the silent room, I think you're the one who's finished. You just don't know it yet. Whitmore's expression shifted from angry to incredulous. Did you just threaten me? Not a threat, I replied calmly. Just a prediction. Based on experience watching people like you. People like me. He laughed, but it sounded forced. And what exactly does that mean? I could feel my wife's hand on my arm, could sense her silently begging me to let it go. The smart move was to walk away, to leave with dignity intact. But something in Whitmore's smirk, the absolute certainty that he was untouchable, that he could humiliate people without consequence, made me reconsider. It means people who confuse position with power, I said. Who think that because they've clawed their way to middle management, they've reached the top of the mountain. When really, they're just loud voices in a small room. The flush on Whitmore's face deepened to purple. You have no idea who you're talking to. I am the vice president of operations for one of the most successful marketing firms in this city. I could. You could what? I kept my tone conversational, almost bored. Have me thrown out? Go ahead. It's your party. For a moment, I thought he might actually do it. His hand twitched toward his phone, and I could see him calculating the optics. But before he could decide, one of the partners appeared at his elbow. James, we need you backstage, the older man said quietly, shooting an apologetic glance at our table. The presentation's about to begin. Whitmore straightened his jacket, regaining some composure. He leaned down, his voice low enough that only our table could hear. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Both of you. I'll make sure it's memorable. He smiled coldly at my wife. Sarah, we'll need to have a conversation on Monday about professional conduct and appropriate associations. I felt her entire body go rigid beside me. The implicit threat was clear. Stay with me, let this slide, or face consequences for your career. Don't, I said softly, but Whitmore was already walking away, his shoulders back and confidence restored. My wife sank into her chair, her face pale. He's going to make my life hell. You don't understand. He has influence with the partners. He can block my promotion, assign me to terrible accounts. Sarah. I'm not angry at you, she said quickly. He was completely out of line. But he's vindictive. I've seen him derail careers for less. She pressed her fingers to her temples. Maybe we should leave. Maybe we should stay, I countered gently. She looked at me, confused and frustrated and worried all at once. Why? So he can humiliate us more? So I can watch my career implode? I took her hand, waiting until she met my eyes. Trust me. Please. Something in my expression must have convinced her, because after a long moment, she nodded. Okay. But if he starts again? He won't. I was fairly certain of that. Men like Whitmore were bullies, and bullies avoided prey that fought back. He'd made his point, asserted his dominance. Now he'd move on to easier targets. Dinner was served, though I barely tasted the expensive food. Conversation at our table was subdued, everyone processing what had happened. Jennifer kept shooting sympathetic looks at my wife, while the others seemed torn between solidarity and self-preservation. Nobody wanted to be associated with someone who'd just made an enemy of the VP of operations. As dessert plates were cleared, the lights dimmed and a spotlight illuminated a stage at the front of the ballroom. The CEO took the microphone, a distinguished woman in her 60s whom I'd researched extensively over the past 6 months. "Thank you all for joining us tonight," she began. "We're here to celebrate another exceptional year, but also to announce some exciting changes for our future." My wife leaned forward, her earlier distress temporarily forgotten. This was what she'd been waiting for, the big announcement that had everyone speculating. "As many of you know," the CEO continued, "we've been exploring opportunities for expansion. New markets, new services, new possibilities. But growth requires capital, resources, and strategic partnerships. Which is why I'm thrilled to announce that we've secured a significant investment from a private equity firm specializing in marketing and communications companies." Excited murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was bigger than anyone had expected. "This partnership will allow us to triple our capacity, open offices in 3 new cities, and compete for clients we previously couldn't reach. It's transformative for our company." She paused, her smile widening. "And I'd like to introduce the principal investor, who's graciously joined us tonight to formalize our agreement." My wife grabbed my hand, squeezing it excitedly. "This is huge," she whispered. "If they're expanding, that means promotions, new departments." "Please welcome," the CEO said, gesturing toward the wings of the stage, "the founder and managing partner of Cascade Investment Partners." I felt my wife's hand go slack in mine as I stood up. Every head in the room turned toward our table in the back, confusion evident on their faces. I buttoned my jacket and began making my way toward the stage, weaving between tables as whispers erupted behind me. "That's Sarah's husband. What's he doing? Is this some kind of joke?" I didn't look back. I climbed the stairs to the stage, shook the CEO's hand, and turned to face the room. The spotlight was bright, but I could still make out faces in the crowd. Jennifer's shocked expression. My wife's hand over her mouth. And Whitmore, frozen in his seat near the front, his face cycling through emotions too quickly to catalogue. "Thank you for having me," I said into the microphone, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. "I've been working on this deal for the better part of a year, and I'm excited to partner with such a talented organization." The room was so quiet I could hear the ice settling in water glasses. I apologize for not introducing myself properly earlier. I prefer to observe companies from the ground level before committing significant resources. You learn a lot about an organization's culture that way. I let my gaze sweep across the audience, pausing briefly on Whitmore. You learn what people are really like when they think nobody important is watching. The silence in the ballroom had weight to it now, pressing down on everyone present. I could see people shifting in their seats, replaying every interaction from the evening, wondering if they'd said something that might have reached my ears. The CEO stood beside me, her professional smile fixed in place, though I caught a flicker of concern in her eyes. This wasn't how she'd planned the introduction. Cascade Investment Partners, I continued, has built its reputation on identifying companies with strong fundamentals but unrealized potential. Your firm caught our attention 18 months ago when your client retention rate and creative output surpassed industry standards by a significant margin. I pulled a folded paper from my inside jacket pocket. We conducted extensive due diligence, financial audits, market analysis, competitive positioning. But we also evaluated something harder to quantify, organizational culture. I unfolded the paper slowly. We interviewed employees anonymously. We surveyed clients. We assessed leadership structure and management effectiveness. Several executives in the front rows sat up straighter. Whitmore's face had gone from red to ash gray. The results were mixed, I said. Exceptional talent at the middle and lower levels. innovative thinking from your creative teams. But concerning patterns emerged regarding certain members of senior management. I looked directly at Whitmore now. Patterns of behavior that create hostile work environments, drive away talent, and ultimately undermine the company's potential. The CEO stepped forward slightly. I think perhaps we should discuss this privately. With respect, Eleanor, this affects the entire organization. I'd met with her a dozen times over the past months, always in hotels or neutral offices, always under the auspices of formal business negotiations. She knew I was thorough, but she hadn't anticipated this. Part of our investment agreement includes certain stipulations about corporate culture and leadership accountability. Your board agreed to these terms last week. I could see her processing this, recognizing the implications. We'd built protections into the contract specifically to address management issues without blindsiding her, but I'd kept the details deliberately vague. She was a good CEO, but she'd been insulated from the day-to-day reality her employees faced. Turning back to the room, I continued. I spent this evening experiencing your company culture firsthand. I was dismissed, insulted, and told I didn't belong here, not because of anything I'd done, but because of assumptions about my appearance, my relationship, and my worth. I paused. One person in particular went out of his way to make those assumptions clear. Whitmore started to stand, but the CFO next to him put a hand on his arm, pulling him back down. Here's what makes that remarkable, I said. The person who treated me with the most contempt is also the subject of 17 formal HR complaints filed over the past 3 years. Complaints ranging from verbal harassment to discriminatory behavior to creating toxic team dynamics. I held up the paper. I have the documentation here, obtained through proper legal channels as part of our due diligence. The CEO's expression hardened. She turned toward Whitmore, and I saw understanding dawn in her eyes. She'd known there were issues, there always were, but not the scope. 17 complaints, I repeated. Systematically buried or minimized. Talented employees leaving the company rather than dealing with hostile management. And the financial cost. Conservative estimates suggest that turnover and lost productivity related to this one individual has cost your company approximately $2.3 million over 3 years. The number landed like a bomb. This was language every executive understood. Dollars and cents, quantifiable damage to the bottom line. Now, I want to be clear, I said, moderating my tone. This isn't about personal revenge. What happened tonight was unprofessional and inappropriate, but it's a symptom of a larger problem. Organizations are only as strong as their culture, and culture is set by leadership. I looked back at Eleanor. As part of our investment agreement, Cascade Partners requires the implementation of a comprehensive leadership review process. Independent assessment, employee feedback, measurable accountability standards. We've seen this approach transform struggling companies into industry leaders. I paused. But it requires commitment from the top down. And it requires being willing to make difficult decisions about people who undermine that culture, regardless of their position. Whitmore finally found his voice. This is absurd. You can't come in here and... Actually, the CFO interrupted quietly. According to the investment agreement we signed, they can. He looked apologetic. It's in Section 12, subsection 4. Cultural assessment and remediation. I thought it was standard language. It is standard, I confirmed. For us. Because we've learned that toxic leadership destroys value faster than any market force. And we don't invest in companies that tolerate it. My wife had made her way to the front of the room now, standing off to the side with her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of embarrassment or distress, I realized, but relief. How long had she dealt with Whitmore's behavior? How many times had she swallowed insults, downplayed harassment, convinced herself it was just part of professional life? Eleanor, I said, turning to face the CEO directly. You have an opportunity here. You can view this as an attack, or you can view it as a diagnostic. We're not trying to destroy your company. We're trying to save it from destroying itself. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly.
What do you propose?
Immediate implementation of the leadership review process. Third-party assessors, starting next week. Anonymous employee feedback with protections against retaliation. And pending the results of that review, appropriate personnel changes at the management level. You can't do this. Whitmore was on his feet now, his voice cracking. I have a contract. I have rights. You have a documented history of harassment and creating hostile work environments, I replied evenly. And yes, you have a contract, which likely includes termination clauses for behavior that damages the company. But that's between you and HR. I looked back at Eleanor. This isn't about one person. It's about establishing standards. The CEO squared her shoulders, and I saw the steel that had built her company in the first place. You're right, she said into her microphone, her voice carrying across the stunned room. We've tolerated behavior that should never have been acceptable. We've prioritized short-term comfort over long-term health. That ends tonight. She turned to Whitmore. James, you're suspended pending a full investigation. You'll be contacted by HR on Monday with next steps. Whitmore looked around wildly, seeking support, but everyone avoided his eyes. Even his usual allies had done the math, side with the disgraced VP or the major investor. It wasn't a difficult calculation. You'll hear from my lawyer. I expect we will, Eleanor said calmly. Along with lawyers for several former employees, I imagine, once word of this gets out, better they deal with us than file external lawsuits. Security had materialized at the edges of the room, a subtle reminder that the situation was under control. Whitmore seemed to deflate, the reality of his situation finally penetrating his anger. He grabbed his phone from the table and stalked toward the exit, his expensive shoes clicking against marble like a countdown timer. As the doors closed behind him, Eleanor turned back to address the room. I apologize that this evening took an unexpected turn, but I want to be clear about our priorities going forward. I descended from the stage as Eleanor continued outlining the changes ahead, her voice strong and assured. She was handling the situation better than I'd hoped, not defensive, but acknowledging and committing to improvement. The room gradually shifted from shocked silence to cautious optimism as people processed what had just happened. My wife met me at the bottom of the stairs. For a moment, we just looked at each other, years of unspoken understanding passing between us. Then she threw her arms around me, laughing and crying simultaneously. You absolute idiot, she whispered against my shoulder. You let him humiliate you for hours. Had to be sure about what I was dealing with, I murmured back. And you know I prefer to keep work separate from us. She pulled back, wiping her eyes carefully to avoid smearing her makeup. 18 months. You've been working on this deal for 18 months and never mentioned it. You knew I was evaluating marketing firms. I just didn't specify which one. That's a pretty significant detail to omit. But she was smiling through the tears. All those nights you were working late, you were investigating my company. Among others. This wasn't personal, at least not until tonight. I touched her cheek gently. I meant what I said up there. We evaluate culture because it matters. Good companies with toxic leadership fail. I just didn't realize how directly it was affecting you until I saw your face when Whitmore started talking. She took a shaky breath. It's been getting worse. He targets anyone he sees as a threat, especially women who don't defer to him. I was starting to think I'd have to leave, find another firm. She laughed bitterly. I even updated my resume last month. The revelation hit harder than Whitmore's insults had. My wife loved her job, thrived on the creative challenges and strategic thinking it required. The thought of her being driven out by one insecure bully made my blood boil. That's not going to happen, I said firmly. Not here, not anywhere. Part of our investment agreement includes anti-retaliation protections. Anyone who tries to make your life difficult because of tonight will answer to me. Eleanor approached, having concluded her remarks. The crowd was dispersing now, some leaving early, others gathering in small groups to process the evening's revelations. That was quite a dramatic reveal, she said, though there was approval rather than reproach in her tone. You could have given me advance warning. Would you have let it play out if you'd known? I asked honestly. She considered this. Probably not. I'd have intercepted him, smoothed things over. She sighed. Which is part of the problem, isn't it? I've been smoothing things over for years when I should have been addressing the root causes. You're addressing them now. That's what matters. Thanks to you. She extended her hand to my wife. Sarah, I owe you an apology. I knew James was difficult, but I didn't realize the extent of his behavior. That's on me as a leader. My wife shook her hand, clearly overwhelmed. Thank you. I never expected. None of us did. Eleanor smiled wryly. Though I suspect your husband specializes in the unexpected. The due diligence report he provided was the most comprehensive I've ever seen. 300 pages analyzing everything from our accounting practices to our bathroom maintenance schedules. 287 pages, I corrected. And the bathroom maintenance was relevant. Employee satisfaction surveys specifically mentioned it. Eleanor laughed. See what I mean? Thorough to the point of absurdity. But effective. She grew serious again. The leadership review starts Monday. I want you on the advisory committee, Sarah. We need people who've lived the problems to help design the solutions. My wife's eyes widened. Me? But I'm just a director. I don't have the authority. You have something better. Credibility. The staff trusts you. They'll believe this is real change if you're involved. Eleanor checked her watch. We'll talk more next week. For now, enjoy the rest of your evening. God knows you've earned it. As she walked away, my wife turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Advisory committee. That's a visible role. High profile. You've earned it, I echoed Eleanor's words. Because of what you did tonight. Because of what you've accomplished over the past 4 years, I corrected. The promotion you've been waiting for? This accelerates it, doesn't create it. Eleanor's smart. She recognizes talent. She just needed the excuse to reorganize without the old guard blocking her. Jennifer appeared at our table, her eyes bright with excitement. Sarah. Oh my God. Is it true? Is your husband really the investor? Apparently so, my wife said, still sounding dazed. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. When Whitmore's face went white, Jennifer caught herself. Sorry, I know he was horrible to you. Both of you. But watching him get what he deserved. She grinned. Anyway, a bunch of us are heading to the bar down the street to decompress. Want to join? My wife looked at me questioningly. After the emotional roller coaster of the evening, part of me wanted to go home, pour another whiskey, and process everything in peace. But I could see the hopeful expression on her face, the desire to celebrate with her team, to reclaim the evening that Whitmore had tried to ruin. You should go, I said. Have fun. I'll catch a cab home. Are you sure? But she was already reaching for her phone. Actually, maybe you should come. They'd love to hear the story properly, and... Sarah. I took her hands, stopping the anxious planning I recognized as her stress response. Go. Enjoy yourself. This is your victory more than mine. She studied my face, then nodded slowly. Okay. But tomorrow, we're having a very long conversation about your communication habits and the importance of sharing major life details with your wife. Fair enough. She kissed me quickly, then followed Jennifer toward the exit, already laughing at something her colleague said. I watched her go, relieved to see the tension finally leaving her shoulders. Quite an evening. The CFO appeared beside me, nursing what looked like his third scotch. You really kept that close to the vest. Professional habit. I find you learn more by watching than announcing. And you learned enough to blow up one of our VPs in spectacular fashion. He didn't sound critical, just observational. You know this will have ripple effects. Whitmore's allies, people who benefited from his management style. I know. That's why the investment agreement includes provisions for restructuring. Some people will adapt to the new culture. Others won't. I met his eyes. The company will be stronger for it. He raised his glass slightly. I hope you're right. We're betting a lot on your vision. You're betting on Eleanor's vision. I'm just providing the capital and framework to make it possible. I paused. And making sure the framework includes actual accountability this time. He smiled, a genuine expression replacing his earlier wariness. I think I'm going to enjoy working with you. As he drifted away, I found myself alone in the gradually emptying ballroom. Staff were already beginning to clean up, removing centerpieces and stacking chairs. The elegant venue that had seemed so intimidating hours ago now just looked like an expensive room full of rented furniture. My phone buzzed, a text from my wife. Having so much fun. Thank you for tonight. For everything. I love you. I smiled, typing back, love you too. Don't stay out too late. Advisory committee members need their sleep. Another buzz, this time from Eleanor. Serious question. Did you plan the reveal that way, or was Whitmore's behavior just fortunate timing? I considered my response carefully before typing. I plan to observe anonymously and evaluate before committing final terms. How that observation played out was entirely up to your team's genuine behavior. Whitmore made his own choices. Fair point. See you at Monday's meeting. And thank you for caring enough to look beyond the numbers. I pocketed my phone and headed for the exit, nodding to the remaining staff. Outside, the city night was cool and clear, the hotel's bright lights giving way to the gentler glow of street lamps. My car was being brought around. I'd splurged on valet parking, one of my few concessions to the formal evening. As I waited, I reflected on the strange path that had led here. Years of building cascade from the ground up, learning to evaluate companies not just by their balance sheets but by the human systems that sustain them. I'd made plenty of mistakes along the way, invested in ventures that failed despite solid fundamentals because I hadn't accounted for toxic leadership or dysfunctional culture. Those expensive lessons had taught me to look deeper, to spend time in the trenches before committing resources. Tonight had been the culmination of that philosophy, unconventional, risky, and potentially explosive. But necessary. The valet pulled up with my car, and I tipped him generously before sliding behind the wheel. As I drove through the quiet streets toward home, I thought about what came next. The real work was just beginning, implementing the leadership review, supporting Eleanor through the restructuring, ensuring that tonight's dramatic reveal translated into sustainable change, and helping my wife navigate her new role, supporting her the way she'd always supported me, even when she didn't fully understand what I was working on. We'd built our marriage on trust, on believing in each other's competence and judgment even when we didn't share all the details. Tonight had tested that foundation, but I was confident it would hold. We'd weathered worse storms together. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Sarah. Jennifer just asked if you're single. I told her absolutely not, but she made me promise to tell you she thinks you're a badass. I laughed aloud in the empty car. Tell Jennifer I'm flattered but very much taken. And that you're the real badass, I just have better theatrics. The response came quickly, smooth talker. See you at home. Eventually. Maybe. I smiled, turning onto our street. The house was dark, waiting. I'd pour that whiskey now, I decided. Sit in the study, decompress from the adrenaline of confrontation, and think about how to shape the next phase of the investment. But first, I'd change out of this suit. My wife had been right. I didn't need to wear anything fancy to fit into her world. I just needed to be myself, to support her in the way she needed, and to trust that was enough. Tonight had proven it more than ever. Not because of the dramatic reveal or the satisfaction of watching Whitmore's downfall, but because through it all, she'd trusted me. Even when she didn't understand, even when it would have been easier to leave, she'd stayed beside me. That trust was worth more than any investment return. I unlocked the front door, shed the jacket and tie, and headed for the study. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, I'd earned a moment of peace. The ice clinked against crystal as I poured the whiskey, rich amber catching the lamplight. Through the window, I could see the city lights spreading toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, my wife was celebrating with her team, finally free from the weight of Whitmore's harassment. Eleanor was probably in her office, already planning Monday's meetings. And Whitmore himself was likely raging to his lawyer, refusing to accept that actions had consequences. The thought brought no satisfaction, just a quiet sense of justice served. I raised my glass to the empty room. To new foundations, I murmured, and the courage to tear down what's broken. The whiskey was smooth and perfect. Tomorrow, we'd build something better.